We welcome you back to our midst, and that's just a few of us here out in Hawaii and the Big Island, we call it, and where Madame Pele has her abode here as our local deity. We like to call her Mother Kali's little sister, and she's dynamic and bright and changes shapes all the time if you get up close to her and watch her, and that's just in her physical form. And we have been talking about physical and mental and how they connect. And the senses and the elements are pretty much the physical, and then you have to plug in the prana, the life force, which is missing in our culture. That's a unfortunate thing when the 5 kinds of life force are missing and not explained to you as children. So you don't know how your eyes see, or how your ears hear, or why you move. And you're bound to either attribute it to God, who doesn't see or hear or move. I mean, it's got one eye and one ear, and is motionless, stationary, or you just leave that blank, and then you'd go from body to brain, and brain to its thinking process. But there are many stations, like saying there are many. My father's house has many mansions in it. So you might even say that could be people. They're all different mansions with different rooms in them, because the mind is so compartmentalized like that. I mean, I'm not meaning that in the negative way of saying compartmentalization, but it does have many ways of thinking and doors and doorways in it. And we were just talking about 2 of these main doorways with Krishna's teaching on this chart, and how it's, and Sri Ramakrishna's great saying, which brings it from Krishna to Buddha to Christ to John, and then right up to Sri Ramakrishna. And now we have Shankara, who falls in between the Christian era around 700 AD, and so a relatively recent seer as far as India is concerned. And so 1400 years back is not all that long to go to encounter a divine expression of Advaita Vedanta as Shankara and his line, Govindapada and Gaudapada, definitely were. And so this chart, we're going to give you that negative teaching in it, that if the mind is the gateway to heaven but also the doorway to hell, then what does that mean? And we were saying, and I introduced it a little bit, in the Viveka Chudamani, because you now know that means the crest jewel of just spiritual discrimination. That sloka is 321 to 329, and that sloka has, that scripture that Shankara composed has over 700 slokas, I think, in it. So right in the middle of the scripture, which is a revealed scripture by an Amsa avatar, Shankara, we find this teaching. For the knower there is no greater danger than failing to remain in Brahman. To be always in Brahman should not be neglected, for that neglect is death. And death here would be in the mind. No real death ever happens, because we said that in the beginning, and we could sing that in Shankara's own way if we wanted, by repeating that beautiful phrase we often sing: Namrichor na Shanka, Name Jati Beda, Pita Naiva, Me Naiva, Mata Majanmaha. He goes on to conclude, Chidananda Rupaha, Shivoham, Shivoham. So, Namrichur, no death. I have no death. Name Jati Beta, because I was never born. So it's not a question of birth and death, it's a question of one birthless, deathless entity that looks on to the process of birth and death. So India is always pointing to this eternal verity, and it isn't afraid of giving it names like Brahman or Chaitanya or pure conscious awareness. We're calling it timeless, deathless awareness, and no harm in giving it a name when in the same breath you say it's beyond all names and all forms. So anyway, back to this chart. To neglect Brahman would be a kind of death, like Ramprasad sometimes sings in his songs, a spiritual suicide. They face spiritual suicide who don't remember Brahman. And let's call that anything from hell to dreaming, because there can be bad dreams too. So you can be in a dream like heaven and all of a sudden experience hell. So these shifts of consciousness come upon your mind at any moment. If you haven't taken care to run the middle path and be balanced and even, yogic equanimity, if you could maintain that out here, you could maintain it in your dreams too. So that's why the physical, the burloka, has that diamond in the rough quality, is that you need to polish your diamond here. It's too late to do it in heaven. You can't really work out the karmas because you did the actions here. And then you're going to heaven to try and get free of them, but they're still like a brick on your tail and pull you back down. And so this is a kind of spiritual suicide. We call it just transmigration of souls. And if it happens inside of the three worlds, then Bhur Bhuva Swaha, then you better have somebody say peace, peace, peace to you as often as you can. Or you should say it yourself as a kind of mantra, because that's where the dualities are taking place. The deluding pairs of opposites, Krishna says, dvandva mohena. Moha means to delude. So things that are two and turn into many tend to delude you, pull you away from Brahman, and that's a kind of death. So materialism would be a kind of death, and secularism would be a kind of death. We had the Eternal Gateways, as you remember, in our last series, Bahutva Marg and so forth. Gave names to these 4 gateways that have to do with transmigration all the time. And we'll look at another variation of that teaching here, but this beautiful Nirvana Shatkam, which I just sang one verse of, the 5th verse, speaks to this idea of ultimately no birth, no death. So then the same being who composed this song is saying, nevertheless, if Brahman is neglected, that neglect is a kind of death. So how does it happen? If we want to see, just follow the bouncing ball. I could sing this actually. I've thought about that ever since I put this chart together with this frozen river behind it, the image of a frozen river. And so you see there the bouncing ball of the mind. Shankara starts off by saying, in Sloka 321, brooding on the sense objects. We must say that brooding on the sense objects is different than utilizing the sense objects dharmically. So if you could make that one shift, as subtle as it may be, like I said at the break just a few minutes ago, I've had some success in convincing people not to brood anymore, simply by saying, when they admitted to me they were brooding, I say, brooding is the worst waste of time. You shouldn't engage in it. It's just a waste of time. And so a few people have came back later and said, well, I took what you said seriously and I got rid of the habit of brooding. I'm so happy. I'm much better now. So brooding on the sense objects, it points you to a level of yogic teaching where you can actually have a samadhi of outer objects, and then you can have a samadhi of inner objects. So Patanjali is just calling this savitarka nirvitarka and savichara nirvichara, is that the objects that he wants you to meditate on and renounce first or detach from are outer. But when you do that, then you realize, oh, they're still with me. If I've gotten rid of the outer object, well, I'm still thinking about it. So this is the type of brooding he's talking about. But notice how he's putting it in terms of samadhi of objects. Other people are putting it in terms of brooding on sense objects. So he's taking you towards knowledge, towards concentration. that if you really saw the object as it were, as it really was, then you'd be able to utilize it in a certain way that's beneficial for yourselves and others, rather than getting attached to it, glomming onto it. When we know it can get stolen, that it can decay, you can become bored with it, and a whole bunch of other problems that attend upon the object. And you can brood about it. It's another project. I mean, you can have wealth, and you can just be worrying about losing it. That's actually one of the predicaments, 5 predicaments called complacencies around wealth that Lord Copula talked about in his teachings of Samkhya Yoga early on. And so Sri Ramakrishna said it very simply: if you keep a bag of coins or treasure near a mirror, it always reflects in it. So you take it, put it somewhere else where you won't see it. The mirror can't reflect it. Well, the mirror is your mind, and a bag of coins is all the things you think about. And this has a tendency to attach you, and it also has a tendency to give you pain. It'll give you pleasure owning it, and it'll give you pain by fearing losing it. And this is a duality. Dvandva Mahena. It's a duality that's marching back and forth in the owner's mind, the rich person's mind, in the attached person's mind, and he never sees the doorway in between the two, the third way, the way out. So some of the dynamics of it, not too hard to understand, but you can see there, brooding on the sense objects is how Shankara explains the first trip in this 7 descending steps of negligence of Brahman, the chart's called. And it's much like the 7-fold road to ruin that Krishna speaks about in the Gita. So see it go down the stairs there. Next comes thirst for enjoyment. And this is quite Buddhist too. Trishna, the word I think of, is in the Nidana system of Buddhism, where somewhere along the 12 Nidanas, thirst for enjoyment becomes more important. And so you lose that equanimity of detachment from the thing, or just utilizing it dharmically, or giving it too much attention in your life. So you have to be careful when something grabs your attention too much. I would say this would be a teaching about raising children. You shouldn't put your attention on children. You should put your attention on the Atman in the children. Basically, my teacher said something very amazing once. He said, someone's talking about how their child was so creative. And Swami Sheshananda said, in this society, you shouldn't make them creative. You should make them renunciates. So, most of us are thinking in a kind of naive way, oh, if the child's creative, great. But that's not the way this monk was thinking at all. In this society, he wasn't thinking that way, because he knew that creativity would lead to being taken advantage of by others. Even if the child were naive and innocent, they'd still be taken advantage of. Their creativity would become a product for sale, and so forth and so on. And so in this society, you don't do that. That's dangerous. There's a different way of bringing out their creativity and steering it towards the Dharma, and make sure that the creativity doesn't become a matter of the ego either. Oh, look what I did. See, look what I have done. These are the 5 ways that Krishna describes agency in the Gita. There are 5 acts that the mind's constantly thinking about. One of those is I have done, the other is I will do. And this is how the ego gets out of control. So thirst for enjoyment has its origin, and it also has its follow-up. Its follow-up would be as the ball rolled down the next stair in these descending steps of the stairway, desire to possess the thing. So this chart is an easy study. Basically, it's Shankara's way of putting together how the mind falls, stage by stage, into negligence of its true nature. So he puts it all in terms of brooding on the sense objects. He doesn't put it in terms of the sense objects are bad or negative, because everyone's going to have to use them to one degree or another, from monk to householder, as we were talking about at the break. So basically, brooding on them, thinking about them too much. So should be thinking about ways of opening the path up for my children, rather than thinking about the personality of the children, or what their good and bad qualities are. How about what their samskaras are, where they've come from, where they're going, how I can steer them to a higher path. Of course, you'd have to have dharma given to you in this culture by your parents to think that way, and we haven't been given that. It's coming too late, or it's coming late anyway. Vivekananda said to one person once, introduced him to his child, Swamiji looked at him and said, "You know, I really don't want you, and I don't want your child, I want your grandchild." So what he meant was, you haven't received the Dharmic teachings yet, and you haven't been giving them to your child yet. So the two of you aren't any use to what I'm here for. To waken people up to their true nature via the Dharma, through the teachings. You're going to have to get these teachings into your child. He's going to have to give them to his child. Then I may see some possibility of utilizing a soul. And Swamiji was a person who, in India at least, who was well grounded and well prepared for it, convinced thousands of young men to give up the world. And that has never been done by anyone. So he was able to, just like Buddhism was the nonviolent religion that marched across the world, and that was never done by any other religion. Swamiji was the soul who awakened young men, and some young women too, up to the fact that they needed to give one lifetime to enlightenment, to the realization of their self and helping others. So he based the whole motto of the Ramakrishna order on that. At Moksharta, Jagadhitaya Cha was Atmano Moksharta, means to realize that, I would say, to realize the Atman is always free. Not just to get realized, but to realize that the Atman is always free and in you. And Jagad, world, Hitaya Cha, to help the world afterwards. So you must realize yourself first and then help. See, so this is what he was trying to do, to qualify people. But you can't help people who have fallen into brooding on the unreal, and then have fallen a step to develop a thirst for enjoyment for the unreal, and then desire to possess the unreal. You see how insane that is? Would you want to go on and possess something that weren't real? Yes, they're trying to do that at all times. It's like, sort of like, living on cotton candy. So there's just no substance to this kind of proceeding. So if it fell down to the ground floor, because that was all a description of the original floor, the first floor. Now it falls down to the cold ground floor of neglect of Brahman. This is where then this hell really comes forward to the mind. And you can talk to a person who's suffering horribly in any way that we've mentioned earlier in the first half, and you can say that you can see, no doubt, that they're in a kind of hell. They don't have to go to hell. They're in it. So they often go to some fiery place, underground. It's like this chart back here, Science has us looking backwards, and religion has us looking upwards, but it also has us looking downwards, as if we're going to some fiery pit somewhere. And this is all metaphoric at best, and at worst, well, don't get me started, let's not get into it. I'm pointing us to the idea that these doorways are in the mind, these chambers are in the mind, and all of these chambers are in the big house. See, so if we can start exploring the big house, the upper lokas, and making contact with beings like the sages, the spirit, the saints, the rishis, the mind-born sons, the ascetics, the renunciates, the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and the Sapta Rishis, the 7 great leaders of embodied beings in these 7 worlds, then we'll have a grounds for transcending heaven and hell, really. I mean, sometimes that's sung about too in songs that are that explain it very nicely. Jato shuno karna pute, shabe mayer mantra bate. Jato shuno karna pute, shabe mayer mantra bate. Kali pancha shatavarna mai, varne varne namadore. Kali pancha shatavarna mai, varne varne namadore. Monopoli Vajakali Icha Hoy Torjayachari Guru Data Moha Mantra Divanishi Japa Kori Monopoli Vajakali. So we have this beautiful set of verses from Ramprasad, the divine lover of Mother Kali. He says, O mind, meditate on the mystery of Kali. So he's talking to his mind, which it contains all this, including the idea of Mother Kali. And use any method of worship you please. Or simply breathe day and night the holy name, the mantra, the living seed of transforming power that was given to you and planted in your heart by your teacher. He says all of this is just an explanation to his mind, to realize that it's all in his mind, and that he has fashioned it all from his mind. All the deities are in his mind, and the mantra has come and saved him, in his higher mind. It's come from his higher mind. The mind is all, according to Samkhya philosophy and Lord Kapila, part of Prakriti. So yesterday I was talking to one of my students, or the day before, and came to me in my own thinking process when I was saying that Holy Mother used to say that mind is that you should make your mind your own friend, because you can have the three great boons: human birth, a good teacher, and the desire to be free. Those are the three great boons. But if you don't have the friendship of your own mind, she said she saw people that had these three. They had a human birth, they had a good teacher, and they had a desire to get free, but because they didn't have their mind on their side, they failed. So the friendship of your own mind was a fourth boon she added, which was of utmost importance in her way of thinking to the people of this day and time, which was in India, in Calcutta at the time when she was teaching. And she was having people coming to her from America and England and so forth after Sri Ramakrishna had passed. So I started thinking about that. Make your mind your friend. She couldn't have met Manas because mind's not your friend, really. Manas is not your friend. It's your friend and your enemy. And it can be heaven or hell to you. So she's talking about chit-shuddhi, purity of mind, or Atman. That's who you want to make a friend. You can't get Manas on your side because it's dual by nature. Can't get Manas on your side because it's variant. Can't get Manas on your side because it's Prakriti and insentient. It's not a force you'd want on your side. And if you learn to manipulate it, you become a Prakriti Laya. And you're just building cloud castles in the sky. And they don't come to anything in the end. Like zeros added up, Sri Ramakrishna said. All these sankalpas, all these projections, all these fantasies, all these thought processes come to nothing in the end. You haven't extracted any essence out of them unless you've put the one in front of them. And if you've neglected the one, then that's what samsara is all about. And it's what hell is all about. It's in the mind, and it's been caused by your own mind. So we have to think about make your mind your friend as being the pure mind. The Sri Ramakrishna used to say, pure mind is Brahman. And Buddha mind is, pure mind is Buddha mind, Lord Buddha has said in the Dhammapada. So this is a whole different way of taking a saying from Sri Sharda Devi, Holy Mother, and doing manana on it, as I was saying. Manas, needs to do. You have to do manana on manas and put everything in the right perspective. So the cold ground floor of neglect of Brahman, when you reach it, I hope you never will, but those beings who fall towards it, the delusion, appearance of delusion comes to them. And then they fall further and the ego gains supremacy over the whole thing. That's, of course, we're talking about the unripe ego. You wouldn't want to make that your friend either, but you might want to make the ripe ego your friend, at least temporarily. Sri Ramakrishna used to say the difference between pakvahamkara and apakvahamkara. The ripe and unripe ego. That ripe ego is surrendered itself to the feet of the Lord and Mother of the Universe. So there's a vast difference there. And so you're going to want to avoid that fall. And then you're finally falling to the lowest step, practically, of this whole process here, as he says. And this is all just a slimmed down version of what he says in slokas 321, is it? 321 to 329 in the Vivekachudamani. So he says the advent of bondage happens there. So you can see his way of thinking. Brooding on sense objects gives rise to the thirst for enjoyment, then the desire to possess something which is not real or really possessible. Then the appearance of delusion comes to the soul, and the ego takes over, and the advent of bondage is then a given. Then you get finally to the freezing basement of the forgetfulness of the self. So basically these 6 steps have happened on 3 floors of hell. And this is the freezing, cracking hell, by the way. It's not the burning, blistering hell. You may not know what I'm talking about, but Kala Rinpoche wrote a nice book called Buddhist Meditations, in which he describes the 7 patalas and the gods that are in charge of them, and how each one is called by a different name. There's a hell where non-nourishment hell. You see, it's like you being a mosquito without a stinger. You see, you really want that blood bad, but you don't have anything to take it in, so you're deprived of it. There's another hell he describes about Kubera's hell, where the god Kubera presides over people who are rich on earth, but they never shared their riches with anyone, so they go to this hell, and so they can't get any riches there. It's right there in front of them, but they can't get them. See? I mean, so basically, you know, if you were a conventional Western person, you're thinking, oh, there must be some, they must think that there's these levels of hell which my body actually goes to. But it's your mind that's created them, and it's your mind that goes to them, it's your mind that frees you from them. If everything in Maya is unreal, then certainly those are also unreal. They can't be ultimately real, only Brahman is real. So then, why are you neglecting it? Have I made my point? I hope so. Shankara says here, if the mind once forgets its own Atman, it ventures far out, like a ball, that when it falls, rolls down the stairs and does not stop until it reaches the lowest step. And you're like a little child running after that ball into some dark, hellish, scary, fearful, dangerous place. So this is how, with a chart based on the teaching of a great acharya like Shankara, we segue from Sri Ramakrishna's saying about the gateway to heaven and the doorway to hell. That's manas. That's the mind, the human mind. And if you put 7 billion of them together, you get the loka. 7 billion or whatever it is nowadays, the latest count. And then your ancestors, you know, the billions of them make up the next level in the pranakasha. It's a energy world, you know, a subtle energy world. So that's why I was saying earlier, if you don't know about the 5 pranas and their subtle constituents, then how are you going to use them to get out of the body? You can't. They're blocked. So you think you're the body for 80, 90, 100 years, and then you go to death thinking you're the body, and what do you expect? That you'll also, because your mind has predicated that you are the body, also come back as a body. And how many times will you do that? And how many times will you make this journey? See, up and down, between the Bur and Buvar lokas. You might reach Svarloka, you see. I mean, you'll get some deeper enjoyments there. Holy Mother also mentioned those. They go to a higher heaven for some time and enjoy there, but then their unresolved karmas from their past lifetime pulls them back down into the body. So she's talking about how many souls are in that predicament. So that's why my teacher used to say, as I mentioned earlier, I don't want a post-mortem emancipation, and I don't want to go to heaven. I want, to be free as I am right now in this very body. Jivan Mukta was what he was talking about there. So these two charts we have looked at in that regard, and that was a quick study. Now, I think what I'd like to do is to show you then a more recent chart which kind of explains the Indian mind-only perspective. And I was looking for an image of watermelons. I came to pumpkin, so I like Mr. Pumpkinhead. Actually, I like that better than Mr. Watermelon Head. So I used pumpkins as an image to show how everything is contained within the mind. So first of all, I had to find an image that had rows of pumpkins, because the mind has many stages. My father's house has many mansions. So this is a better way of explaining the mind-only schools. As I have said here at the top of this chart, the seers of India have realized that everything in form proceeds from the mind. And this is why they have revealed the singular way leading to its dissolution. Excuse me. Its dissolution. So mind has concretized everything, but we forgot the art of dissolving it. So Dissolving the Mind Stream was a book that I put out recently, one of those 5 little books, to show us how in meditation as we naturally do this dissolution, we are detaching. So it's not like, I have to practice all this detachment now. So I could just practice this method of dissolving, and as I dissolve the mind again and again and bring it forth, because I'm doing that every night anyway, in waking, dreaming, and deep sleep every 24 hours. So if I practice this consciously in seated meditation, in akasana, then I'll get used to the fact that these things are not real. I won't have to renounce them. I won't have to detach from them. It'll be a natural way of leading me towards seeing through the appearance of things, which is one of the things back here that got you into trouble, isn't it? The appearance of things, appearance of delusion even. All right, so Sri Ramakrishna has compared the mind's propensity for production to rice seed strewn across the ground before the rainy season sets in. A riot of growth is the result. But if these seeds are exposed to fire prior to their exposure to soil, their power of germination is destroyed. This fire is the practice of yoga, which renders the mind's proclivity for desire-based expression nil and void. Opening the gate to samadhi. There are many types of seated samadhis, of knowledge, of peace, of bliss, etc., but there is only one kind of unseated samadhi, and that would be called asampragyata in yoga, or nirvikalpa in Vedanta, whereas savikalpa samadhi would be with form, and sampragyata would be with seeds, samadhis with seeds. So that's why in the first half I was talking about objects can give you a kind of samadhi. So, but that means you have to see them as they are. And then you can have a deeper samadhi of objects by looking at their appearance, their origin in your mind. And a deeper samadhi will come out of that when you destroy the object in the mind. Destroy means to see it as empty, see it as substanceless, that it can't fulfill you. So objects can give, they're taking a place in your mind that is blocking the light of samadhi. If you were to take that object away, then you've got space, right? Just like if I were to move this couch or this chair, Space has opened up. Well, you have to do a bit of the same thing with your mind. There's an object in your mind. You don't want to brood on it because we've seen how that will end. So you should stop thinking about it or think it away and remove it and replace it with something else. So remove the form of the thing with its formless origin. So basically you're just saying the object and the thought. And we haven't been taught to think this way. We think the object has a separate existence all its own. But it's actually come out of our mind. It's mind made manifest. It's thought concretized. That's how Sri Sharda Devi put it to us when she was alive in the body. So these are great thoughts, and they're dharmic wisdom, they're principles. They're put together in words, and we didn't really get to that chart about the words yet, but we can take that up still. But this gives you an idea in this quote about the ramifications of seated samadhi and unseated samadhi, and also how to strip the thoughts of their power to germinate. Because your body also was a thought that you had. See, which body shall I take this time? Which parent shall I be born to this time? And you have to realize that you're in one of these chambers of the Lord's mansion after you're dead. You see, after your present life has passed, and just like going to dream, you will go into a deeper dream at the time of passing, and you will have the ability to see with a third eye, with a deeper eye. And the Shambhala schools of Tibetan Buddhism describe this really well about which of the jeweled worlds that you could go to. And of course, we have all these other mentions of different kinds of systems like chakras and lokas and bardos and so forth. So all of this has been explained by the seers of different religious traditions in such a way that consciousness shifts like this. Now, consciousness with a capital C never shifts. It always stays one. It's that Brahman that we were talking about that you don't want to neglect. So if you keep it first and foremost as the one in front of all those zeros, and all those zeros in this case could be all these worlds, and all these deities, and all these beings, and all these incarnated bodies and so forth, you're keeping that first and foremost. That's the practice of an Advaita Vedantist. That's the mind-only school goal. I'm using mind-only school here in a broader sense than we usually look at it, or that you will find it used in contemporary Buddhism today. It means all Indian schools really think upon this line of mind only, that the mind is the creator of the worlds and the objects that fill the worlds, and it also is in charge, or should be in charge, of the prana that flows to create the worlds, the psychic prana and the prana itself, right on down to the ability to move and breathe. And of course, I'm resisting again and again mentioning waking, dreaming, and deep sleep too much in accord with these teachings, but that's the Advaitic way which Shankara himself would go to in his teacher Gaudapada, because it takes you to these great teachings of aparinama and ajativada, that there's no origin to anything, it's all endless, and there's no birth or death to anything. So all of these start us off to understanding the path of mind-only school perspective. Now there you see, as far as an image goes, to give us a visual that may help us, you see the first set of pumpkins most readily in view, and I've put in a sidebar there with one of them cut open. So you see, if that basic pumpkin there in the foreground would represent the 5 elements or primal matter, because we know there's subtle matter. We should know that. There's prakriti, nature, and then there's unmanifested prakriti. It's a huge teaching that we're also missing, is that, the seeds gave rise to this. So you're going to have to plug this in along with all the other information or teachings you're getting in the Dharma to understand that we have a bifurcation here in nature, and we're not accounting for the invisible part of it, the unseen, the held in abeyance, the impotential. That's infinite. See, that's the internal infinite. And because many rivers, many oceans, many land masses, many trees, all of that comes out of these seeds. That's their origin. And it's all in nature. But then nature is in the soul. So you're making these connections consciously in your meditation by understanding these as tattvas, and then following the tattvas like breadcrumbs back to the first tattvas that you used to get into the body. And then maybe higher tattvas by which you can see what's beyond bodies and what's beyond the three worlds. So this is a process that's been used by seers in India from time out of mind, and they keep bringing it back with all the teachers who come in the next yuga or the next Mahayuga. These teachings all come back as seeds themselves. And these seeds would be these words. See, if the seer, let's just look at that real quick. If the seer, Mahachamasya, didn't see all the worlds in that particular time, the quote goes here from the Taittiriya Upanishad, Bhurbhuva Svaha, that's these worlds. These are verily the three celebrated mystical utterances. In addition to these, there is a fourth, which Mahachamasya proclaimed. He is a rishi. That one who meditates upon these, called the four Vyahritis, comes to know Brahman, and to that auspicious one all the gods bring homage. So the rishis are higher than the gods, because the gods say, oh boy, he's seen beyond our level, and he's seen a world that's beyond us. So he's penetrated through to a much subtler chamber, if you will, of the house of the Father. Or we'd call it the house of the Mother in our tradition. Shakti. So I go back to that because we mentioned words. So and that's as much as I want to take of that right now, so we won't get off the track of this in our time remaining, and maybe finish this mind-only chart, is that if the seer is born into a time where even the Dharma has been dumbed down to such an extent that even the rishis of the day aren't seeing as deeply as they could, then that seer recovers his revelation of other worlds by seeds. And he knows that he's meditating on Bhurbhuva Swaha. Does it sound familiar? It's the Gayatri Mantra. Bhurbhuva Swaha Tat Savitur Varenyan Bhargo Devasya Dhimohi Yo Na Prachodayat. Ancient, you see. So that is set in stone. That is an eternal mantra. That has been chanted and is chanted even today by billions of people every day. It's not going to be forgotten, even by ordinary, so-called ordinary people. Like, say, just, if you could call them that, an ordinary devotee. That mantra, you see, has the three Vyahritis in it, you see. You see what's being said here is that everything is in a word. That Shakti power is in a word. Mantra, Bhuta, means all the Bhutas, all the beings have come from these power words, you see. Shakti Rupaya, the form of Shakti is in them. Tulya Smrita, see, the memory, Smrita, is in those seeds, and that's her that you're talking about. So all the seers, the scriptures say, all the seers know and remember her as the imperishable Shakti. She is the meaning in all the slokas and the sutras of the revealed scriptures. Without her, all the tattvas would be as useful as clouds with no rain. She is the secret meaning in all the mantras, and her essence is the essence of non-duality. Right out of the scriptures. Some seer wanted to describe her as the power in all words. So it wouldn't be enough to say Om, or Aim, or Hrim, or Bur, or Burva, or Svaha, or, God forbid, any of the destructive beaches, like Hum, Oh, I didn't say that. So all of these, everything is in a word, because a word vibrates, doesn't it? And when you hear a word, it has an effect on you, right? Some words, very little effect, just everyday mundane things. Other words make you sit up, you see, pay attention. And, it's true in any subdivision of consciousness. If you talk about subatomic particles, then all of a sudden you've got interest amongst the scientists. Or mathematical theorems, or Bartok or Kadai, amongst musicians, or Prokofiev or Shostakovich, all of a sudden you've got people not only thinking of that composer, but hearing the music they wrote in their heads. Okay? So I can run some symphonies through my mind, the whole thing. I don't have to go to a concert hall and listen to it. I've played them so often in the orchestras I attended for 30 or 40 years that they got implanted in my mind, you see. Now, isn't that proof enough that she exists as the memory of everything and all beings? And that those notes were put on page by these great composers were actually bijams with power in them, and that they will exist from time out of mind, and they will inspire people? I mean, I'm just talking about music. Just that one little cross-section of life, you see. And I can hear the opening of Brahms' Fourth Symphony, the horns in 4 parts. And then I can hear the strings accompanying them, and so forth. And so that's a great composer who put that down. Well, a great seer who put down the sloka that I just chanted, that mantra rupa shiva bhuta shakti rupaya tulya shakti rupaya, that's all in the tantras, you see, in the great sayings of the scriptures. They realized that, and they wanted to express it about her, that she's the power in all mantras, that she's the meaning of all the scriptures, and that her essence is non-duality. I mean, basically, that will be remembered from time out of mind, just like Bur, Bhuva, Swaha, Tat, Savitur, Varanium. So back to what I was saying, if Mahachamasya only was living in a world, you see, where the common run of realization was about the 3 worlds, because basically most of the beings here don't know about these 2 worlds, right? I mean, even Christians are only saying, I'm going to heaven, or the Hindus saying, I'm going to heaven, but how much do they know about heaven? Do they remember having visited it before? Do they consider it up there or back there? Or do they really know that it's in their mind every night when they go to sleep? Do they really know that their fathers and mothers and grandmothers never died, but just went there, back in their own minds where they came from, and that you're doing the same thing? Do they really know this? Do they live as they know it? I mean, do they live while they're knowing that? Or is it just all some sort of conjecture or some, oh, wait till later to see kind of thing, you see? So then think about Mahachamasya all of a sudden seeing with his third eye the Maharloka. Well, thank you for teaching me the Gayatri, because I knew about the inner worlds, and I could go all the way up to Indra and the gods and the goddesses that were in Svarloka. And maybe by perpetuating Indra, he would let me through to the Maharloka. The guardians would open up the gate, and I'd be able to get through the gate, and I would then go to realization of the word Mahar, Mahat. You see, the Mahat, the mind of God. I would actually start to be in the mind of God, which beggars description if you're coming from the three lower worlds. Beings don't even know about the two inner worlds, what to speak about the world of the Mahat, where you'll meet such big saints and seers and rishis, you see, conscious beings. So this is a rather long-winded explication of the power of words, bijams. And when you got your mantra from your guru, if you did, and I hope you will, get initiated, because that means you've started into spiritual life again, and it can take you further, then you should know the meaning of these bijams. And if you don't, you should go back to that teacher and ask them what they mean, and get teachings on them. Because there's too much left open and suspect in spiritual life today. The teachers need to take responsibility for their students when they give out these teachings. They need to explain them comprehensively, and you have to listen. You have to take this in, you see, because this is ancient wisdom, the Dharma. Those beings who are speaking about it are not there to have fun or to waste their breath on people strew pearls before swine. Pardon the Christ-like analogy, which is so apropos. But they want you to be free. And you'll need to get free of thinking that happens here, and dreaming that happens here, and a kind of hazy deep sleep that happens there. And so, attention, you see. If thine eye be single, you'll know that truth. So, I got into a long explication again about this chart, but let's look then beyond the 5 elements, because you see this first pumpkin head has 5 elements, primal matter, and that got me started on prakriti and unmanifested prakriti. That there are seeds to all this. And I'm not just talking about seeds for trees. I'm saying the tree has a seed. I'm not talking the ones that falls from its branches. I'm talking the one which is an idea in your mind of tree. Swami Vivekananda used to say, nothing is ever born, nothing ever gets destroyed, and so forth. He says, you can destroy the clay cup, but you cannot destroy the thought clay cup. Let's give it a try. See, can I make the thought clay cup go away? Or is that a seed in my mind that's going to make more clay cups? Well, that can either be a positive teaching or a negative teaching, because if you've got brooding in your mind on senses, sense objects, like the last chart we looked at, then that can take you on a road to hell, you see, hellish existence or ignorant existence, because you're brooding on that. But if you're seeing that and taking it inward to a higher trajectory, then you can use it as, where's the origin of the forest? Where's the origin of the tree? Where's the treeness of the tree? As I've said it before, and Dalai Lama has said that teaching, there's the outer tree you're looking at. That's Maya. It's not what it seems. Then there's the real tree. The real tree is changing particles tree. If you could see the tree as it really was, you'd see it swirling, you see. You'd have to put on some sort of pranic eye to see that. But beyond the real tree and the unreal tree is the essence tree, the treeness of the tree. And that's in the thought. You see, that's an eternal thought in the mind of God. So you're going to have to go to the mind of God to find that. The Mahat, Maharloka, is filled with beings who know this. And they reached down to Mahachamasya and they said, it's time for this to be given to this age, and we're going to use you as the vehicle to see this. So here's the revelation. Now just start saying Mahat, Maharloka. Here we'll give you a mantra for it. And how did he know it? Because it's in a seed that's eternal. He had just forgotten the seed. So you can bring all the potential out of yourself this way. All the potential out of yourself. talking to a person today, a woman who's studying so hard, books, and languages and things. I felt like saying, why are you doing that? You know all this. And put that same attention and all the time you're pouring into that to Brahman. And realize your true self, and realize that all of this knowledge lies as seeds inside of yourself. And bring it out and express it for the highest good of people. Not just for getting a degree or for making money or whatever. It's been done enough, you see. Get thee behind me. Off with it. And do things with right orientation for the highest purpose. And no holds bar in it, you see. Waken up 1,000 people with this knowledge if you can. Give me 12 lion hearts and I'll change the world, is how Vivekananda put it. That pumpkin there, you can see it also is attended by the physical body, which is nicely accorded to the saying outer shell, you see, of the pumpkin. It's sort of like a tube, you see, the outside of the tube. And then there's a vital force there, which is senses and prana. You see, and to see the arrow coming down. So we're going inward now. We're starting from the outward and we're going inward. And let's move inward to the ancestors, which is the next row of pumpkins back there. See, they've gone back to a subtler seed stage called heaven. You see, ancestors and so forth, semi-divine beings. And they've done this with the prana. So you can see why prana is important here. See, if you don't have prana, how can you get to your ancestors? If you don't breathe with prana, how can you enjoy this world? What to speak of the next? So that's said in the Upanishads. How do you think you can enjoy this world? What to speak of the next? If you don't have this connection back into your ancestors through the prana. And I could have written right there, if I had room, psychic prana. Because there's a thought process. It's making your senses work. See, your mind makes them work. Your mind conducts the prana, sends it through the senses, and the senses see the objects and create the worlds, and all in the house that Jack built. And this process is going on and that with every breath. In breath, held breath, out breath, in breath, held breath, out breath. But it's just like waking, dreaming, deep sleep, waking, dreaming, deep sleep. And you're moving in this expansion and contraction with a suspension at the end of each. You expand, you suspend, you contract, you suspend. That's the way the worlds get projected by the mind. That's the way the prana moves. That's the way you sleep. That's the way you breathe in these movements. Basically 3 movements with a suspension. The suspension might as well be kumbhaka, might as well be turiya. See, if for the conscious soul. They'll breathe in and hold it, you see, and enjoy that no movement. Breathe out, hold it again, enjoy that no movement, you see. So, these secrets are generally not known to the ancestors when they leave the body, so they die ignorantly. If you were to know these secrets of prana, you would die consciously, and you would take on your next conscious birth, and you'd be like Mahachamasya, you'd be ready for transcending the 3 worlds. Heaven would not be good enough for you, like my teacher. I do not want to go to heaven, that's not my goal. He was taught by Holy Mother and by Swami Shardananda, who are Sri Ramakrishna's own kith and kin. So he knows that there are much, much higher levels of realization. He wants to be Jivan Mukta, a living, liberated soul, like he saw in Swami Brahmananda and, of course, Swami Vivekananda, whom he didn't actually see. So, beyond the ancestors is another row of pumpkins as we wind this up, this first class. As you can see how this is going to go on and deeper for the next 3 weeks. The celestials are that next row of pumpkins. You could almost match them up with the semi-divine beings and so forth, or the Gandharvas and Apsaras. it's not so cut and dried as all that. It's not like lines of demarcation, but actually there are granthis or barriers that keep souls in one level of understanding and won't let them pass to the next. And that's a thinking process that creates those granthis. It's a thickening of thought. And then when it thickens, it congeals, you see. It'd be like ice on water, you see, or something. But then there's no more water on top of that layer of ice, and then another ice, and then more level of water. So you're getting penetrating through these frozen realms of thought. You see these frozen rivers, and penetrating through them to get to the next level of water where you can breathe and swim. You see. So again, back to it. If you were doing this consciously, you'd be practicing your breathing consciously, and your mantra consciously, because mantra and breathing go together. You see. Sometimes the practices are if your mantras, you say the mantra with the in-breath and hold it with a thought and say the mantra with the out-breath. Or when you're falling asleep, you can do this. You say the mantra as you breathe. And this has the effect of opening up these knots and these granthis to give you more special spiritual experiences that will come from them. One way of doing it. You can also do it through knowledge. Behind this row of pumpkins in the far, far distance is the gods and goddesses, so you've probably made it to Svarloka by then. And where Indra, the god of gods, presides over all of them. It's a very high level of embodiment. But in a general way of speaking, the seedless state lies beyond that. You can see some of the names for it there. Asampragyata Samadhi, Satori in Zen, Nirvikalpa Samadhi in Vedanta, Nirvana in Buddhism, then of course the Asampragyata is in Patanjali's yoga, or Patanjala. So back there, the forms disappear, and this is why it's important to know about the seeds in the seedless state. And you might as well connect them directly with the power of understanding. Intelligence. Where is intelligence? Why do we understand words? What is it we're understanding when we hear things? How are the ears responding? How is the mind and heart responding when we hear these things? It's not just a matter of the vibrations coming across the air and pounding against our eardrums a little bit, and then hopefully it gets through. It's much, much deeper than that. There's an inner ear and an inner eye that you're going to have to open. And you'll hear Om, and then you'll see the light, Shabda and Jyoti, basically. You'll have the mystical experiences, or you'll have the visionary experiences. And all these can change and commingle too. So, again, this is kind of a quick study, but if we have time for it, and we just have a few minutes, look at this sidebar where we cut open the pumpkin. And so this is a look at the internal mind where all of this exists. See, it's all in the mind. Whether it's the great mind or the collective mind, cosmic mind, collective mind, or individual mind. This is all one mind, really, placed in 3 or 4 divisions. So if your consciousness can qualify itself to exist consciously at that level of mind that you're meditating upon, then you'll have this revelation that like Mahachamasya had. And it can just open up from there. I mean, the beings that were sending Mahachamasya the revelation were probably at the Tapa Loka. They were the ascetics there who had already realized so much of what is to be realized in the great mind. And you see the mind-born sons here. If they got that from Brahman, Lord Brahma, then they also have transcended the Maharloka and know what the mind is all about. You see. Like Lord Vashishta was a mind-born son of Lord Brahma. So back to this cross-section in the few minutes, there's the internal mind of the subtle body and its projection power. So if you probably can't see these little tiny things, maybe if you're looking on the live streaming, you can see it. These little tiny, probably 6 or 7 point entries I gave here. I put nature, worlds, bodies, whole races, objects, gods, and God are all seeds in that cross-section of that pumpkin. They're all seeds in the mind. And then across the bottom, Ikarnava, the ocean of ethereal matter. You see, is there the residue upon which Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva float at times of no form. So there is a time of pralaya where everything goes back to its potential state. Everything does this. So at that time it would seem like, if you could see it somehow, that there was no God and there was no light. And like in the beginning was darkness. Both the Rig Veda and the Bible start out with those sayings. So if you were to somehow open your eye on that, you'd see the entire annihilation of everything. You'd probably be Shiva at that point, at the end of a cosmic cycle, looking at everything totally dissolved. And the one powerful realization that would be attending upon your great mind at that time is, I'm still here. I think that's a good place to end. And we'll start maybe with this to segue into more teachings on mind as heaven, or mind as the kingdom of heaven within. Let's end here with a chant then. Om Tach Nayo, Om Tach Nayo Ravrinni Mahe, Gatung Yagyaya, Gatung Ye Nupataye, Daivi Svastarastu Naha, Svastir Manushebhyaha, Urdvam Jagatu Bhesajam, Sangno Astu Dvipade Sangchatushpate, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we make a powerful, and deep, and humble offering of the small self into the great self, of this mind into Brahman. May we always delight in this offering. May we always revere the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices involved in it. May divine blessings be upon us, and may peace be unto the entire human race. May healing, well-being, and prosperity then also come amongst us. Om Peace, Peace, Peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.